Hello and welcome back to the Busby Way Podcast. We join for another thrilling week of Manchester United football. There's never a dull moment on this podcast, I don't think. I think people are now watching this and tuning this in to laugh at us rather than enjoy the content now. I think it's getting to that point, Liam, isn't it? How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just doing the best I can with the inconsistency of the team.
Oh, no, it's dreadful. I mean,
since we started, 2 wins in a row was a bit of a struggle.
Oh.
So, yeah, we're
I
obviously.
know. We mentioned that, me and Chris last week. We said, will we manage to get 2 weeks at 2 wins in a week? It doesn't look like we are going to. So, unfortunately, to be honest with you, I think it's impossible to now. I think even given the midweek games. But Manchester United played Aston Villa again this week, this time in the league and away from home. They drew 1-1 after a last 10-minute collapse. They were one. Not 1-1, sorry. They drew 2-2. They drew 2-2 after a last 10-minute collapse. They were 2-0 up until, I think it was the 78th minute, and they conceded twice in the last 10 minutes. Was it an improvement on last week, Liam, despite the score?
First half it was. I was not saying much. First half was a definite improvement, but our fantastic set-piece coach in Noe let Emi Buendia score a late equaliser in the first half. Smallest player on the pitch. That would have been an embarrassment, but yeah, it's not really saying much, to be honest. It's better than last week because we couldn't have gotten much worse. I mean, we were pretty lacklustre in the FA Cup. We got through, which is the main thing. We're against Middlesbrough in the next round at home, so should be a good chance to get through. But first half we did well. We controlled the game for the opening half an hour. Villa got into the game a little bit towards half time. Obviously, it's expected. It's a Premier League away game. It's always going to be tough to control a whole half of football, especially when you haven't got, we're not exactly the elite midfields of like City and Liverpool, for example, in the way back there, so cohesive and what they demand of each other. We've got Matic, Fred, and Bruno in there. Two of them probably wouldn't be starters for any of the other big six clubs, but that's just how it is at the minute. Yeah, and then second half we scored. We were actually poor, I thought, for the majority of the second half.
Yeah.
We scored a goal. Ranić didn't change it, despite blatantly seeing his lack of, as he likes to have, proactiveness and control. We didn't have control of the game, I thought, and it felt as though it was coming, that Jacob Ramsey goal, because they just kept on skipping through the midfield, which was just a bit vacant. I think Ranić said if he had the chance again, he'd go for a 3 at the back, which is basically a 5 back because of the 2 wing backs. But yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. I probably would have gone for an extra man in midfield, just try and give a better shield with the defence, because the defence did fine for the majority of the game. And, with just 2 really bad lapses of concentration, we obviously got a bit fortunate in other parts of the game defending. I thought it was definitely improvement, but obviously it's hard to be very positive when you don't get the result that is demanded of you when we're in such a race for the top 4 as we are. We're really, on the back foot. We've got Ranić was brought in this easier, quote unquote, run of fixtures to get the points to the board straight away and to give them a real good chance. And we're not actually maximising the glaring opportunities in front of us to push ourselves into the top 4 positions. It's quite disappointing, but it's quite clear to see that we do need a signing at least for the centre of the park, because we are just too open, and that's shown again. It's just unsustainable to carry on like this.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, and for me, I can't put a finger on it, but where do we go from here? Because there's a lot of people saying there's a lot of issues at Man United, and then I was speaking to a few people yesterday that said they think we actually are just 2, maybe a central midfielder, maybe 2 central midfielders away from actually just being all right. I think we've got a good basis of a good squad, but in terms of getting it ticking, we all know in football that midfield is the core, and that is the most important part of a team. You look at every single title-winning team probably has had a great midfield. Like they've had at least a solid core. It's got a solid spine in that team. Do you think we are just maybe that central midfield signing away from maybe even challenging again, or is there more problems at Man United than that?
It's hard to tell, really, isn't it? I mean,
Mm.
we've been in this sort of limbo and vicious cycle for so long now where, we've had, come to May, it'll be 9 years since we last won the Premier League, which feels like a lifetime ago now under Sir Alex. And it's hard to tell. I mean, we definitely do need the midfield reinforcements. I'd say we need three, I think, is what I would probably put as that three central midfielders. I actually think the rest of the team's fine, or should be fine.
Maybe the fullbacks.
Yeah, the fullbacks are obviously a questionable one. We've got, it's a difficult one with the fullbacks because on the right hand side we've got two players who are very polar opposite to each other, and Wan-Bissaka and Dalot. Dalot's a lot more exciting going forward, but maybe leaves a little bit to be desired when it comes to defending. Although I don't think he did too bad on the weekend, but I thought he got he got caught out a little bit in the second half, which is maybe where experience shows. For someone like that, he obviously needs to be moulded a bit more into the system. Ranić clearly rates him higher than Wan-Bissaka as he's played the majority of the games. Fits his system more, but yeah, and I actually thought Tellez had a good performance on the weekend. Maybe his crossing maybe wasn't quite there, but I actually thought he did all right. But yeah, I'd say we need three midfielders. I think what the club will probably aim, or what the club should have been aiming to do, because Ollie wanted to do it, was play a 4-3-3. Now, Van der Beek came in, I presume, as, the man to replace Paul Pogba in the long term. And Van der Beek's not getting the minutes. I can't explain why. Maybe it's because they think that the lack of physicality there might hinder us if we play him in a more deeper two in the midfield. I just think that a midfielder who we've been linked to Dennis Zakaria, for example, we had a defensive lever like that who could protect the back four, and then you could have Bruno Fernandes and Van der Beek in the three in a 4-3-3. It would work a lot better than having to sacrifice a technically sound or really good going forward player as a box to box or another good central midfielder to sort of try and mould into one defensive midfielder like we do with Fred and McTominay in the famous McFred midfield. I think is probably one of the most underwhelming things since the Schmidfield under Van Gaal with Schneidlin and Schweinsteiger, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's so frustrating. I just don't think the balance is there with any of the defensive players that we've got in that midfield. I think the back four, if it actually had a bit of protection in front of it, would be all right. I mean, look at City in the Champions League. It keeps on going back to this when they bottled. Well, I say bottled. Pep Guardiola got it tactically wrong in the final, and he didn't play defensive midfielder, and they got opened up cheaply for the first goal and the only goal of the match, and they got done like that. And a good defensive midfielder sets the tempo, and also he gives you that lever, something for the defence to rely on in front of them, so then they just don't have bodies running at them. Because the way we saw the Villa men skipping through the midfield on the weekend late on for their first goal and the equaliser was quite concerning. It shows that we've got a lack of awareness and a lack of ability to close games out. Matic is he's been a decent player in previous years, but he's probably done. I'd say he's 34 in the summer, I think it is. So yeah, he's really on his last legs as far as playing for us goes. But my calculations for three midfielders comes from the fact that Matic is old and probably can't do the job anymore. So you really need two in case you want to play two from the back four. And then also we need a central midfielder because Mata, Lingard, Pogba, all their deals expire in the summer. I think it was interesting to see that the Daily Mirror, I think it was, actually touted Hannibal Mejbri be moving up into the first team squad after AFCON, because he's obviously away with Tunisia. And we paid a lot of money for him as a youth player. I think we paid 8 million from Monaco for him. So he might provide some form of solution as to a player to replace maybe, or to come in a bit fringy and get minutes under his belt and impress us as what is effectively a prodigious youngster. But we do need some more experience in players that have experience of doing it in and around the top and elite levels before we start to look behind and look at youngsters again, because that's a good option, but it's also the cheap option, which is sometimes what United are too reliant on.
Speaking of a youth player, I thought Elanga played really well yesterday. This, is in against Villa this week. Elanga played really, really well. What did you make of him? I think for me, he suits the Ralph system better because he is more inclined to press. He is a quick, agile, attacking player, and he seems to be able to play anywhere along that left-hand side or through the middle. And it's a bit more versatile, especially in that 4-2-2-2. You need to be able to cover that flank a bit more as well as the central role. Do you think he might rely on Elanga a bit more over maybe the likes of Sancho and Rashford?
I think that against Brentford, because it seems to be almost flavour of a week with Ralph Rangnick at the minute with some of his player selections. I think he'll probably start against Brentford in the next game. I think he'll probably be given a bigger role as time moves on under him, I'd say, or at least he's put his hat in the ring to be at the club next season under whatever manager we have. I think it was quite obvious that Ralph liked him from day one because he got a new contract straight away. I think it was a 5-year deal he got put on the plate for him because he's obviously worked hard, and as well, it's a bit disheartening because in a way, like Rashford, I look at Elanga and Rashford and I think, well, maybe Rashford needs to look back to basics, a bit like Elanga is now as a youngster coming through, where you don't have that fear and you just go for it. I mean, I thought Elanga was terrific. I thought he showed good ability on both feet. He was unlucky not to score a couple of times. He was one of our more threatening players. I thought maybe perhaps him and Mason were a little bit shot greedy. They wanted to shoot all the time, but at least they're having a go. I mean, Cavani didn't really get into the game too much. It's a bit frustrating. But I thought Elanga was probably up there as one of our man of the matches with obviously Bruno on the weekend. And obviously in a time where perhaps the fans are a bit disconnected with the club, it's nice to have a youngster come through from our academy and certainly does him no harm. And when you look at other people in the club at the minute, obviously like a certain Anthony Martial, who's been in the rumour mill of late due to supposedly refusing to travel, it only puts him in better light, really. I can't praise him enough for his performance against Villa because that's only his third Premier League start. And it looked as though he played quite a lot of games. He really had Matty Cash where he wanted him throughout the game. So, fair play to him and best of luck for the lad.
We'll quickly touch upon that Martial business because it for me, we've said it so many times on this podcast about Martial. If he doesn't want to be there, get rid. However, there seems to be this bit of confusion because I remember under Ollie this season when he was supposedly injured, but his girlfriend was coming out and saying he was completely fine. Do you remember all that whole business under Ollie? Can't remember if it was this season or if it was the end of last. But he eventually put on his social media last night. He said, "I will never refuse to play a match for Man United. I've been here for 7 years and I never disrespected and will never disrespect the club and the fans." What do you make of it? What do you make of the whole situation?
If I had to say who I think is telling the truth, which, it's a bit bad that it comes to this as a professional football club and such a big club, trying to work out who's telling the truth in all this, I would probably say Ralph Rangnick is telling the truth between the two. I don't see why you would put two goalkeepers on the bench and have a spare sub slot. So, you allowed how many subs it now? 9?
Yeah.
9 people on the bench. Obviously 5 or 3 subs are allowed, but 9 subs. And we had 2 goalkeepers on the bench and we only sort of managed to get 8 subs to the game. I can't see why this would ever be a thing if he was available to play. I personally don't believe the guy. I mean, as well, I remember against Brentford, Ranić also said Martial isn't injured. Before when he didn't get on the bench again, it was a bit of a surprise in a way, because when you looked at our bench against Villa, you thought, who's going to be a one to change? And you obviously looked at Sancho, but that was it as far as attacking players go, because Marcus is injured, Ronaldo's injured, Cavani's on the pitch, Greenwood, our other strikers on the pitch, and you're like, well, Martial, the next one, maybe Ahmad, but Ahmad didn't even get on the bench. It was a bit frustrating. I mean, it might have made a difference or might have not at the end of the day. There's obviously no guarantees, especially not of the way he's performed the last 18 months. But I remember at the start of the 18-19 season, he came back late because of his child's birth or something like that. And he didn't inform the club and he got fined, I think it was. And, he's not particularly in the clear when it comes to punctuality and discipline. And with the way his agent's been talking about him actively wanting to leave, I don't think it would surprise if he didn't want to play. I think he sort of sums up where the club's at, to be honest. A good player that on his day can be good, but ultimately doesn't cut the mustard and won't be the one to carry us forward. There's a lot of people in the squad who are like that. It's frustrating because we know the ability that he has shown in the past, but I don't know whether this is another time. I think I read somewhere from the MEN that he seems to have some form of complex. When somebody joins the club, he seems to go off boil. A bit like when Ibra came in, Alexis came in, Cavani's came in. He seems to have fallen off every season after they've joined. So, don't know. I mean, I just wouldn't put, if he has refused to play for the club, I wouldn't play him again. And obviously we've had some disrest in the club for a while now, it looks. And Dean Henderson stormed out of training the other day, apparently, when he was told he wasn't going to get picked for the cup game. I have sympathy because he's barely played. He's played 2 games and one was against Young Boys where he got subbed off for Tommy Eaton with 20 minutes to go or 10 minutes to go. But at the end of the day, there's a time, to place, and a way to show your professionalism. You've got to conduct yourself in a certain way if you want to be part of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it'll be interesting and telling to see if Martial is among the players picked against Brentford in midweek on Wednesday. We'll quickly preview it because I think I previewed it last week by accident. Don't know why I did that, but I think I did. We'll still talk about it anyway. We spoke last week and we said Brentford is a difficult game. There's no denying that. And it's one of those games, a bit like, when Stoke used to be it's a stadium you didn't want to go to and it was tough. And that you'd have to put in 110% if you wanted to come out with something there. I've got a feeling that's going to be a similar thing on Wednesday. And I have a feeling a similar team will be picked because that team seemed to work hard for Ranić at the weekend against Villa. Do you think it will be a tough game? Do you think United will get points there, or do you think we might struggle against Brentford?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a difficult place to go. Chelsea were very fortunate to walk away, if anything, when they won 1-0 early on in the season. We obviously drew 3-3 with Liverpool. I think they only lost to City 1-0. So, they're the 3 teams above us. Well, they're the main 3 teams above everyone behind the top 3, because obviously the rest of the teams in the league have been pretty poor, I think, in terms of Arsenal, Tottenham, United. I think we've all just been very poor. So yeah, it will make for a tough game. I think there's no question about it, but we'll have to step up our performance again because it did surprise. I think it did surprise a lot of our own fan base about the first half performance at Villa. I think we're actually pleasantly surprised, which sort of shows how bad we've been at times this season. We're surprised at a good half an hour spell against a team who's loitering in the bottom half of the table. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, because they're quite good out of possession, Brentford, as well as in possession. They're very effective in the way that they play. And, I think they've got a few danger men in Mbuemo. Ivan Toney looks good. Vissa looks good. That striker that we got in the summer from a French team, I can't remember which one, might be Lorient or something like that. They are a very, very good unit, and I think they have been a bit of a breath of fresh air for Premier League, because you sometimes get teams who are quite, I don't know, like predictable and direct, or we seem to in the last few years of them and people like Sheffield United in the first season under Wilder in the Premier League look really, really interesting and difficult to play against. I think they'll provide a stern test of our character, and we simply have to win. We're in a stage now where our points tally's poor. It's 32 after 20. When it was 19, it was obviously duplicated, and he gets 62 points a season, which is very, very poor for a team with the players that we have in it. But I think the imbalance of the team just obviously causes such big problems for us. I think we just have to be fully on our game if we are to beat them, because they are a really, really good side. And it's full credit to Thomas Frank, because not many people thought much of them when they came up to the Premier League. But they've came up and they've shown that they are the real deal, and that they can give anyone a really good game, home or away.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about the doubling the points tally, and it's not great. At the minute, we're currently 24 points behind Manchester City. And I know Manchester City have been great this season, but to be 24 points behind your rivals halfway through a season, that's not on at all. Because, like you say, if you double that, if we're halfway through, 48 points behind Man City at the end of the year, it's disgraceful. You can't accept that. You've got to look at that as, I hate to go back to it, but you've got to look at it as the owners of the football club and think the team in the same city as us are 48 points clear of us. That is something that needs changing and needs an investment and needs not just to the squad, to the facility. I'm not just talking about players, go out and sign players because we've been there. We've done that in the summer. You can't say we haven't signed players because we signed Sancho, Ronaldo and Varane. But just invest in the infrastructure and actually put a structure in place at the club that will allow the business side to thrive and on the pitch side to thrive. Because that's the only way we're going to catch Man City. I saw someone debating it on a podcast, and they said Man City are now so far ahead in front of everyone else. In order for someone to catch up to them, they've got to do more than Man City every single season. And right now, Manchester United just aren't, unfortunately. I know we signed players in the summer, but so did Man City. You've got to sign more than what City do to catch up to them. That's the way it works. The thing for me that'll be the judgment with City is when Guardiola goes. Because when Guardiola goes, that is when it'll either make or break that club. Because if they find someone who's a replacement, who's a long-term replacement, who can come in and fix them, then they'll be fine. But if they don't, they might fall into the same category as we did with Fergie. You'd think they'd have a plan in place ready for when he does go. But who knows? Who knows? I mean, we'll quickly preview it because you mentioned there about Brentford giving a fresh air to the league. Another team who I think have actually done really surprisingly well this season. Again, they've carried it on from the end of last year. Is West Ham. They're currently sat fourth in the league. We play them at the weekend on Saturday. I don't know about you, but I'm actually, can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm actually worried coming up against West Ham. I know they've just come off the defeat against Leeds. They got beat 4-2 by Leeds, which is a poor result considering where they are in the league, where both teams are in the league. And given it was at West Ham, wasn't it? Was it at West Ham? Yeah. Given it was at West Ham, it's not a great result for them. Do you think they'll bounce back this weekend against United? I hope they won't, but do you think they will?
It's going to be a very tough game. To be honest, I think when you go back to what you were just saying about the ownership quickly, we do seem to be in this everlasting limbo and vicious cycle of everything comes back to them. We do get, as fans of United, we sometimes do get labelled quite ignorantly as self-entitled. Now, obviously, there are self-entitled people out there who, expect to win every single year. United used to be like that under Fergie. We used to be challenging every year. But ultimately, all the bad things that happen on the pitch is as a result of the ownership model. The lack of infrastructure in the club, letting non-football people run the club. You know, it's left Anthony Martial on a £250,000 a week contract. Not many other players in the Premier League have a £250,000 a week contract. Our goalkeeper's on £375,000. Those rumours Pogba's been offered £500k a week to stay. You know, those rumours Maguire's going to get upgraded to £300k a week. And ultimately, that's where the buck stops with the owners and the people who sign off these deals. You know, our manager sometimes doesn't have a choice as to whose contract gets given. You know, Jones got 4.5 years or whatever, and Smalling got 5 years, and Young got given a contract extension, and all these people around the same time who should have been going a refresh should have been happening at the end of the 2017-18 season. It happened, you know. I think ultimately the owners, you know, they've left us with people who don't like or don't watch football enough to understand you know, what the game's about. And ultimately it does leave us in the situation where we almost need a miracle worker to come in every time to try and fix the mess. And obviously one of these people, you know, good beeline here was David Moyes, who he was the first manager post Fergie, and we got put into this situation where we had no football men running the club anymore past David Gill. And yeah, he got done over by Ed Woodward, I'd say, quite badly. He got, in the first summer transfer window, linked with Fabregas and Thiago and all sorts. And yeah, we got Marouane Fellaini, and then we got Juan Mata. That was it. That's all we got given. The squad was quite desperately in need of finance or, you know, investment, and it just didn't happen. Some people have been saying of late, because of how well he's done with West Ham, that, you know, if he'd probably be in line to be the Man United manager, or would be considered if he hadn't already done, or if he hadn't already have had the spell he did with us, which was nothing short of a disaster at the time. You know, it was a hard role to walk into, but to his credit, he has bounced back well. And, you know, it's going to be tough. They beat us in the League Cup early on in the season 1-0. We didn't play well, but obviously, you know, that's an hour player. West Ham did their job. They also ran us really close in the league when David De Gea had to pull off that last-minute penalty save to Mark Noble. And, yeah, they've got a team that is working really well as a unit. We've got nice balance in it. Obviously, Declan Rice is a player that Ollie was after. And, you know, like any other team in England at the minute, will probably want in their team. And yeah, makes me laugh that we were too scared to sell Jesse Lingard to West Ham in a way, because if you're running Man United, you're too scared of West Ham as far as competing for stuff at the end of the season goes. You might as well quit your job and retire now. I mean, because they're a good team, but they're not a particularly. They haven't got the heritage of winning. Do you know what I mean? Like last season, we wouldn't sell to Everton because we wouldn't sell Romero to Everton because we saw them as top 4 rivals. Look where they are now. You know, if you're scared of Everton, compete with you over a 38-game season, quit your job. If you're a club, do you know what I mean? It's,
especially a club the size of Man United, the size of where we are and what we expect and the players we've got. If you, like you say, if you're scared of Everton, you're scared of West Ham. Why are you there? Why? What? You're not made for the. You're not put out
that's for it. You're supposed to be aiming for the sky.
Yeah.
When you're United, if I sort of sit there and think, you've watched Liverpool win the league for the first time in 30 years. Mm-hmm. City are on course to win 4 league titles in the last 5 years. If that doesn't motivate you to be better and to better yourself and to push on and to give you a target to shoot down, then, you know, or to aim at, then why are you there? Like, that should be the ultimate motivation that the teams that you dislike the most are at the top. But
let's be honest, City are very close to doing that treble. They are knocking on it, and I won't be surprised if they do it this year.
Yeah, it's quite dangerously close. You know, you look at Chelsea; they were champions of Europe last season. City have taken them apart twice this season in the Premier League. No qualms about it. And you know, it both finished 1-0, but Chelsea barely had a chance of goal. No. So, you know, I think it's quite a daunting prospect for the club at the minute. I think West Ham is going to be, it's make or break, I think, the next few weeks, because we're in a situation where we have to wings the writing is on the wall, but they're about to do what you do on Word when you put in the title. It's going to be in bold and italics and all sorts soon. You know what I mean? And it's going to become more apparent that the top four won't happen. To have players like we do, we actually risk losing them if we're not careful, due to the constant limbo the club's in. But
and also you struggle, you lose the ability to attract players as well.
yeah,
Because if the big players are leaving, big players aren't going to want to come because they're going to realise there's a reason they're leaving. There's a reason they don't want to be there.
I mean that's it. I mean, part of me also thinks the next manager is going to be the big deciding factor.
Yeah.
I mean, it probably between Ten Hag and Pochettino at a minute.
Yeah.
And I think Pochettino gives us a guaranteed stability in a way of that we'll always be in and around the top four positions. But Ten Hag is one of those where it's not like a maverick, but he sort of comes in as a bit less unproven, but he might be able to get a fine tune out of the players that we've got, especially when you look at the midfields. If we were to get a defensive midfielder, it might be like a Bruno situation where we were on the cusp, but we needed something desperately to tip us over the edge, like a tipping point, and that's what we got with Bruno, just to take us to that next level. A defensive midfielder might free up the team significantly, but I don't know. I think West Ham as well is going to be tough. They've shown many teams this season that they're there, but they're not there just for the sake of it. They've really put in the hard graft and the hard work over the last couple of years, and fair play to them. I mean, they've done it on a fairly limited budget. Moyes actually stripped back, what the club had. It had maybe a few prima donna players like what we have. It had people like Felipe Anderson and people like that, and he didn't particularly choose Sebastian Haller, which came across a bit of surprise to people, but he took away these players and he's brought in hard workers like Jared Bowen and other players like this who have really exceeded expectations and have kicked them on.
It reminds me a lot of the Everton team they used to have. A lot like what he did to them, and he made them, in and around that top four area every so often. And he built a hard-working team. You look at the players he had, like Fellaini, and the likes of like Leighton Baines, who it was a solid player for Everton for a lot of years because of David Moyes. So yeah, credit to him really. I mean, I think that's his level. I think we saw at United he maybe wasn't cut out for the big job. However, at West Ham he's doing a fantastic job, and it's a credit to him. But yeah, just quickly, I'll quickly ask you: do you not think? You mentioned there Ten Hag and you mentioned Pochettino. Do you not think that Ralph will be here permanently next year? Because I saw an article before we went on live. I was reading that Ralph's actually concerned that the United aren't backing him in this January transfer window, which makes him question how much sway and how much say he'll have next season in his consultancy role, implying that he's not going to be the manager next season. Do you think that Ralph won't be the manager next year?
It's a big question. Really, if they're not willing to listen to a proven sort of wizard when it comes to recruitment, he's only gone and got Kimmich and Haaland and, Mane and Keita and all these players, Upamecano, Konate, all these players for the Red Bull groups and their various different teams. If they're not willing to listen to someone who's been proven as a success in terms of recruitment strategists and strategies, then might as well, it's frustrating. What is the point of him being there? He has to ultimately have to say. Woodward, part of me looks at Ed Woodward and thinks he's really egotistical for not just ever giving football people the football side of it. I don't think he's even that good at business myself. Obviously, we've seen this week that Manchester City have overtaken United on revenue. Obviously, part of that is due to what I would assume their inflated sponsorships due to the Abu Dhabi group, if Etihad Airways sponsors and the Expo stuff. And then obviously their on-the-pitch success, which is obviously the driving force for great football brand. On-the-pitch success is key for that. And Edward Wood has averaged 70 points, I think it is, since becoming United's CEO. Yeah. If he's not allowed to pick and choose who he wants or to try and help out, then what I don't understand, because really it's almost like we've appointed a manager to be almost an internal director of football, but they're just not giving him a say. I think the Haidara one's interesting because I think Haidara, people are sort of rationalising and saying, oh, well, he's at AFCON with Mali. Well, actually, wouldn't that push you forward to trigger a release clause on the 1st of January and get it sorted before AFCON? You know, because supposedly he'd already talked with the player. Why wouldn't they just get it sorted for the 1st of January? Just put the £33 million in, because we're quite desperate at this point. And you'd already have him done. And then Zacharias, €6 million. If you leave that till the summer and he's a free agent, you're going to have literally everybody sniffing at him. You know, you're going to have Bayern Munich doing it because that's their typical transfer strategy. Free agents or cheaper, reduced price, high quality players from rival clubs in the league. I think Liverpool were linked with him. I think, not sure if Barca or Juventus were, but there was a lot of big teams linked to Zakaria, and I think it's a bit of a joke that United have loitered and let it go along. I mean, it was plain and clear to see, even last season, that we were needing this position, and to just neglect this position is just a joke. I mean, I don't understand. If you're running the club, you want it to be the best it physically can be, and surely Ralph Rangnick, I'm not sure he'll have a job next season. It depends on results, really, because obviously football is such a results-heavy game, and we're in quite a turbulent period where he needs to get the results and he needs the performances to sort of help back it up a little bit. But yeah, I think that we're getting a new manager at the end of the season, which sort of it maybe doesn't bode well for the current set of players, because they might be thinking, oh, we've only got 6 months left with this manager. Why listen to all this heavy gegenpressing stuff? But at the end of the day, they've got professionalism and a job to fulfill, and they get paid well for it. So it's quite a conundrum and quite a peculiar situation we find ourselves in. It's not often this has happened at United, a caretaker manager till the end of the season, especially with so long remaining in the season.
Yeah, I agree. And we said last week, he is an interim manager and he is here till the end of the season as manager. And that's, you say like why players might think, oh, stuff it, we aren't listening to this interim manager. But at the end of the day, he's going to be the one that's going to be deciding whether you're on the books next year and the year after, because he's going to be in that consultancy role. So he'll know. I think Rangnick will know who he wants to keep and who he wants to build that squad around and who he wants to get rid of, definitely. And by the sounds of it, I think the likes of Martial and Lingard are the two of them players. I think them type of players are maybe on his list to get rid of. But we'll wrap it there, because we have covered the transfers bit and the rumour mill a bit there at the end. So we'll wrap it there instead of going diving into it, because we've pretty much done that. So thank you for joining, Liam, as per usual. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully next week, let's see if we can win 2 on the bounce. We've got Brentford and we've got West Ham. We'll see. I mean, I'm not hopeful. I don't know about yourself, but we'll see. I don't think, have we only ever done it once?
It really isn't very often, and it's staggering because when we started the podcast, we were around the top of the table, weren't we? At this time last season, we were top of the table.
So fell apart. It's this podcast. I think we've cursed Man United. I think you forget blaming the Glazers. I think you blame the Busby Way Podcast for the demise of Manchester United. So every time we come on here and say something, it always turns out to be either truthful or worse than what we thought. But yeah, thank you for joining me, Liam. As I said, make sure you check out all the content that's put out on local TV. They don't just put out football content; they put out various other news articles as well. And there'll also be a local TV for your area, so make sure you check that out on Facebook and on the website. So thank you all for joining. We'll see you probably the similar time next week. It'll either be a Sunday or a Monday, either or. And goodbye.